He was barely a teenager when he lured his best friend into the school's bathroom, stabbed him 40 times, and kept the knife in his backpack. But that's nothing compared to these stories of the 10 youngest serial killers throughout history. Number 10. Eric Smith. August 2nd, 1993. Just your typical summer day, right? Well, not for the small town that saw the unimaginable happen. 13-year-old Eric Smith headed to a local park for summer camp, just like any other kid, except that day he crossed paths with Derek Roby, who was also on his way to the same camp. And what happened next is the stuff out of nightmares. Smith lured little Derek into the woods nearby, and there, he ended the life of this innocent boy in a spot that should have been filled with laughter and play. If that wasn't horrifying enough, Smith went the extra mile and poured Kool-Aid from Derek's lunchbox into his wounds. I mean, seriously, who does that? Now, because Derek hadn't shown up to the camp, a frantic search began, plunging the whole community into shock and disbelief. The sheer brutality of this crime, coupled with the fact that both the perpetrator and the victim were so young, sent shockwaves across the nation. People grappled to understand how a teenager could be capable of such unspeakable cruelty. Hold on. It gets even darker. Just 6 days later, Smith confessed to his mother, and the authorities got involved. As details about Smith's life emerged, it was revealed that he often felt like an outsider, constantly subjected to bullying and mockery because of his appearance. This torment likely played a part in the emotional turmoil that led to this tragic event. Come trial time, Smith's defense brought up his intermittent explosive disorder, a condition marked by unpredictable violent outbursts. But the prosecution wasn't buying it, especially given his age. 1994. Smith was convicted of second-degree murder and slapped with a sentence of 9 years to life. While he was behind bars, he didn't just sit there. He publicly expressed remorse for the pain he caused the Roby family. But that wasn't the end of the story. For years, Smith's case has become a battleground for debate about the justice system's approach to young offenders. Could someone as young as him truly grasp the gravity of his actions? Could rehabilitation work for him? Or was punishment the only answer? October 2021. The bombshell dropped. After 27 years, Smith was granted parole. Cue the intense debates. His release, initially set for November 2021, was delayed due to housing issues. Finally, by February 1st, 2022, Eric Smith was back on the streets, reigniting the conversation about justice, rehabilitation, and how society grappled with the complexities of dealing with young offenders who committed the unthinkable. Number 9. Craig Price. July 27, 1987. In a type of peaceful town like Warwick, Rhode Island, you would have never expected what was about to happen. A 13-year-old named Craig Chandler Price broke into a home, grabbed a kitchen knife, and unleashed a terrifying act of violence. He stabbed 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer a staggering 58 times. I mean, could you even imagine? Now, you might have hoped that this was some kind of one-time madness, right? Wrong. September 1st, 1989. Price, now a 15-year-old high school freshman, decided to crank up the horror meter. Under the influence of marijuana and LSD, he targeted another family, and what unfolded was an absolute nightmare. Joan Heaton, a 39-year-old mother, endured 57 stab wounds. Her daughter, Jennifer, was stabbed a jaw-dropping 62 times. But wait, it gets worse. Price took the youngest child, Melissa, and not only stabbed her 30 times, but also crushed her skull. The knife handles broke, leaving the blades lodged in the victims. This is too sick for even Hollywood to write. And when the authorities finally caught up with Price, his reaction was downright chilling. He confessed, and get this, he did it calmly, without a shred of remorse. As investigators dug into his motives, they found a disturbing backstory. Price pointed to racial tensions he felt as a child, recounting an incident where white adults hurled racial slurs at him and even tried to run him over. However, there were other warning signs. Even before these heinous crimes, Price had shown signs of violent tendencies, like torturing small animals, a red flag that psychologists often warn about when it comes to predicting future aggressive behavior. Now brace yourselves for this. Despite these gruesome crimes, Price was arrested just a month before his 16th birthday and processed as a minor. Yeah, you heard right. That meant they could release him at 21 with his records sealed. He was so brazen that he even bragged about his impending freedom. But the community wasn't having it. They rallied together, forming the Citizens Opposed to the Release of Craig Price to fight for his continued incarceration. His case shook Rhode Island so profoundly that it forced them to rethink how they handle these juveniles who commit such serious crimes. Behind the walls of prison, Price's violent streak didn't just vanish. No, he faced multiple charges, from refusing psychological tests to getting into brawls with other inmates. Now, because of his violent tendencies, he was transferred from Rhode Island to Florida. Even in Florida, though, on April 4th, 2017, he was implicated in another stabbing, landing him an extra 25-year sentence. Number 8. Mary Bell. May 25th, 1968. Another day etched in infamy. Just before her 11th birthday, Mary committed a chilling act. She strangled Martin Brown in an abandoned house. I can't possibly imagine this. 3 other kids stumbled upon Martin's lifeless body, and aside from some blood and foam, there were no visible signs of violence. The post-mortem couldn't even pinpoint the exact cause of death, leaving everyone baffled. But that's not where the nightmare ends. July 31st, 1968, another tragedy unfolds. Brian Howe was found dead, and the evidence pointed to strangulation, suggesting that the killer might also have been a child. Nearby, broken scissors were found, which, trust me, played a huge role later in identifying the perpetrator. Enter Mary Flora Bell, born on May 26, 1957, becoming one of Britain's most notorious child criminals. Her MO? She lured her young victims by pretending to check a sore throat and then brutally strangling them. It was reminiscent of a dreadful fantasy. Now, Mary's upbringing, far from stable. Her mom, Elizabeth, was often AWOL, leaving Mary and her siblings to fend for themselves. And this is where it makes sense. There were rumors that Mary might have suffered various forms of abuse from a very young age. Signs of disturbed behavior were all over. At school, at home, something was seriously wrong. Her violent tendencies reared their ugly head early on. She tried to harm her classmates in different ways. Her first known attack, May 11, 1968, when a boy was found injured. Both Mary and her friend Norma Joyce Bell were suspected, but back then nobody really did much, if only they knew what was coming. As detectives unraveled the case, they talked to over 1,200 children, but 2 names stood out, Mary and Norma, both girls having conflicting statements, but now the plot thickens. It was one detail in Mary's statement that sealed the deal, her knowledge of those broken scissors found near Brian Howe's lifeless body. With further investigation, both Mary and Norma were charged with Brian's murder. December 1968. The unbelievable happened. Mary was found guilty of manslaughter because of diminished responsibility attributed to her psychopathic personality disorder. She was only 11 years old, but she was sentenced. Norma was acquitted of all charges. Mary was locked up, but released in 1980 at 23 years old. In this unexpected turn, the court granted her anonymity, which extended to her daughter and granddaughter. Under different names, Mary Bell has since vanished from the public eye, leaving behind a truly disturbing chapter in British criminal history. It is a chilling tale, making you wonder about the darkness that lurks in the most unexpected places. Number 7. Michael Hernandez. February 3rd, 2004. Michael Hernandez lured his best friend, Jamie Go, into a school bathroom. What followed was a merciless and brutal attack where Hernandez stabbed Go over 40 times. The school premises in Palmetto Bay turned into a place of unimaginable dread that day. And to make matters even more chilling, Hernandez concealed the bloody knife in his backpack after that harrowing attack. Hernandez's trial took place in 2008, offering a solemn glimpse into the details of this heinous crime. The jury rejected his claims of insanity and instead found him guilty of first-degree murder. It was during this trial that we got a disturbing look into the darker corners of Hernandez's mind. He kept a haunting journal in which he listed people he wished to kill, including his own sister. Reports even emerged that Hernandez had a morbid fascination with infamous serial killers like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer. It is a stark reminder to check on your kids' heroes every now and then. He held the troubling belief that he was on some some sort of dark mission to cleanse the planet through acts of unspeakable violence. And the most unsettling part of this is he was just 14 years old when he was tried as an adult for this gruesome crime. Fast forward to 2016, and this case takes another turn. A new hearing was required following a 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling. This ruling declared that juveniles couldn't automatically be sentenced to life without parole, which is what Florida law required when Hernandez was initially sent to prison. After the reevaluation, this decision was later made applicable to older cases. So after the reevaluation, a Miami-Dade County judge upheld Hernandez's life sentence, ensuring he remained behind bars. Turns out Michael Hernandez passed away in prison at 31, a life far from what he might have once imagined. The exact cause of his death remains unknown, adding another layer of mystery to this already unsettling story. Number 6. James Fairweather. Ever heard of the Colchester Killer? No? Well, prepare to feel sick. This story revolved around a young boy born in 1999 who at the tender age of 15 became one of the UK's youngest convicted serial criminals. Oh, you heard me right. Let's dive into the dark life of this guy, Fairweather. From the get-go, his life was a hot mess. Academic struggles? Check. Undiagnosed dyslexia making things worse? Check. Then in 2012, his grandmother's death messed him up even more. And trust me, that was just the tip of this disturbing iceberg. Fast forward to March 29th, 2014. Castle Park turned into a scene straight out of a horror movie. Fairweather brutally attacked James Atfield, a father of 5 with a history of brain damage from a previous car accident. Now this next piece of violence was next level crazy. Atfield got stabbed over 100 times. I mean, how much hate do you have to have, you know? His arms and hands were covered in wounds, a clear sign that he was fighting for his life. This whole community was absolutely shaken to the core. But you know what? Fairweather wasn't done yet. A few months later, on June 17th, he struck again. This time, his victim was Nahid Almenia, a 31-year-old Saudi student from the University of Essex. And check this, he didn't just stab her. He stabbed her in the abdomen and drove a knife into her eyes, claiming it was to stop her from seeing evil. That doesn't make your hair rise. What will? Colchester? It was in a state of terror. People were on edge, clearing overgrown areas to get rid of any hiding spots for potential attackers. The police were on the case, questioning everyone, including Fairweather himself. But it wasn't until May 27, 2015, that this nightmare finally ended. A dog walker noticed him acting all sorts of suspicious, made a call, and the police swooped in. They found him armed with rubber-gripped gloves and a knife. So yeah, you could say the end was near for him. His trial in January rolled around and Fairweather tried to pull a fast one. He denied the murders, attempted to plea for manslaughter, and claimed that he wasn't all there in the head. But the court psychiatrist called that bluff, saying that he wasn't psychotic like he claimed. And on April 29, 2016, the gavel slammed down. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 27 years behind bars. Number 5. Daniel Bartlam. April 25th, 2011. A 14-year-old named Daniel did the unimaginable. He attacked his own sleeping mother, Jacqueline Bartlam, with a hammer, ultimately causing her death. If you thought that was chilling, he didn't stop there. To cover up that heinous crime, he set their family home on fire, making it look like a terrible accident. Get ready to feel some more chills run through your bones. As investigators began peeling back the layers of this gruesome incident, they started noticing inconsistencies in Daniel's stories about what went down that night. And his behavior afterward? It was deeply unsettling to say the least. And the next thing we find out is that Daniel had a disturbing fascination with violence and crime. Fast forward to the trial in 2012 and brace yourselves, because it turns out that this 15-year-old had been an avid viewer of the popular TV soap opera Coronation Street. It's no big deal, right? Wrong. There was a specific storyline in that show involving a character's death, and it seemed to have a profound impact on him. They discovered that Daniel had actually written a story where he imagined murdering his own mother, drawing eerie parallels to that show. So we go back to the age-old question. Did the media play a role in influencing his violent actions, or was there a deeper psychological issue at play? It was the talk of the town. Daniel's defense was quick to jump in, arguing he had a significant personality disorder, emphasizing the urgent need for psychiatric attention and care. In a classic cover-up move, during the trial, evidence showed that Daniel had tried to delete that violent story from his computer, thinking he could erase those digital fingerprints of those sinister thoughts. But the experts had managed to recover it, and what they also found was that he'd been Googling information on starting fires, suggesting a level of premeditation making everyone feel uncomfortable. And the verdict? Well, considering the gravity of his actions, the court didn't mince words. They found him guilty and slapped him with a sentence of at least 16 years in prison. The whole case just left people wondering about the dark and tangled web of influences and mental problems that lead to these horrifying events. Number 4. Alyssa Bustamante. October 21st, 2009, Alyssa lured Elizabeth Olsen into the nearby woods. And you can probably imagine where we're going with this. Alyssa strangled Elizabeth, cut her throat, and brutally stabbed her chest 8 times. Oh, it gets darker. Alyssa had actually premeditated that horrifying murder by digging a grave for Elizabeth 5 days before this terrible incident. Now, why on earth would anyone do such a monstrous thing? Alyssa's motive was chillingly sinister. She wanted to know what it felt like to take another person's life. I mean, what are the parents doing? So let's dive a little bit on Alyssa Darlene Bustamante's life for a moment. Born on January 28, 1994, she obviously had a troubled childhood. In 2002, she was placed in the care of her grandparents, Gary and Karen Brooke, because of her mother's addiction problems and her father's incarceration. Her descent into darkness became even clearer around 2007, when she attempted suicide and had a chilling cutting hobby listed on her YouTube profile. Now, after she committed this murder, her behavior was beyond disturbing. She wrote in a journal, "I just killed someone, strangled them, slashed their throat, and stabbed them. The feeling was exhilarating. Once the initial fear's gone, it's exhilarating. Yet I'm shaky now. Off to church I go." So yeah, you heard that right. She casually went to church, even while that search for Elizabeth was ongoing. When the legal proceedings kicked off on November 17th, 2009, Alyssa initially pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder and weapon use charges, but by January 2012, she accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder, leading to a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 2024, along with an extra 30 years. In 2014, her appeal for leniency was swiftly rejected. There was one silver lining, though. Any earnings she made from discussing her crime would be disclosed, potentially helping Elizabeth's devastated mother, Patricia Priest. Throughout these legal battles, mental health professionals diagnosed Alyssa with major depressive disorder and borderline personality disorder, giving us a little glimpse into her deeply disturbed state of mind. Number 3. Harvey Miguel Robinson. Now, what seems like just another day turns into another horrifying story. 17-year-old Harvey Robinson, initially intent on burglary, entered the home of 29-year-old Joan Burgart. This nightmare escalated way beyond burglary. Days later, Joan's lifeless body was discovered, revealing a grim tale of rape and cold-blooded murder. So here's where we find something about Robinson. He wasn't just a common criminal. He was evolving into one of America's youngest serial killers, and the community had no idea that Joan's tragedy was just the beginning. Robinson's upbringing was far from normal. His father, consumed by vices, casted a shadow over his childhood. An alcoholic who'd been arrested for the manslaughter of his mistress. Not exactly a role model. At school, Robinson displayed athletic prowess and even won essay awards. But there was a darker side to him. Multiple arrests for burglary and resisting authority hinted at a deep-seated defiance. Within a year of Joan's murder, another innocent life was lost. Young Charlotte Schmoyer, making her paper delivery rounds, fell victim to Robinson's depravity. She was abducted, raped, and left lifeless with her throat slashed. Robinson's unpredictability became even more evident when he was targeting homes not for theft, but something far more sinister. After a series of horrifying incidents, including a failed attempt to kill a mother and her daughter, Robinson's reign of terror reached its climax. He fixated on Denise Samcali, a previous victim, planning to finish the vile act he had begun. But fate had a different plan in mind. With the police closing in around Denise's residence, officers set a meticulous trap to capture this elusive predator. Then came that fateful night. Robinson, armed and determined to execute his wicked plan, confronted Officer Brian Lewis, who was equally determined to stop him. Shots rang out, echoing the tense standoff between the young serial killer and the law. In the chaos that followed, Robinson, although wounded, managed to escape, leaving behind a trail of blood. However, his luck had finally run out. The blood trail led officers straight to a hospital where he sought treatment. Cornered and with no way out, he surrendered, ending his reign of terror. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. DNA, eyewitness accounts, and physical proof all pointed to his guilt. I think the sentence could have been harsher: 97 years in prison and 3 death penalties. Legal battles later commuted 2 of those death penalties, but one thing still stands: a grim reminder of the horrors this young serial killer unleashed on the community. Number 2. Graham Young. 1962 is a year etched in British crime history. 14-year-old Graham Young from Neasden, London, brewed up a lethal concoction to poison his stepmother Molly Young with a dose of deadly antimony. They called him the teacup poisoner, and this was just the beginning of Graham's reign of terror. Born on September 7, 1947, his dark fascination with all things toxic started early, like really early. By age 8, he was gifted a chemistry set, and from there, it's a slippery slope. Young Graham had this creepy habit of casually discussing toxins with his friends like it was small talk. Imagine casually talking about the weather and he's over here talking about arsenic like it's the latest gossip. Now, his obsession only got worse with time. As a teenager, he started experimenting with various poisons, using family members, friends, and even teachers as his unwitting test subjects. This guy was on a one-man mission to terrify his community, driven by a twist interest in toxicology and a complete disregard for human life. And just like any other psychopath, in between poisoning people, he was meticulously journaling their symptoms and the progression of their illnesses. It was like he had a clinical detachment from the whole ordeal. Molly Young's death, initially seen as natural, was just the beginning. Graham escalated his poison game, and this time his father, sister, and a close friend fell victim to his deadly experiments. Investigators were stumped, trying to wrap their heads on these unrelated, mysterious deaths. Fast forward to 1971. When Graham was a 23-year-old menace, his sinister activities had finally raised enough alarms. He got arrested with multiple murder charges, and during the trial, it became clear that he had a scary knowledge of toxic substances. The jury didn't waste any time. Guilty on multiple murder charges. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Due to his age when he committed these chilling acts, his sentence was a bit different. He was to remain imprisoned at Her Majesty's pleasure, which basically means an indefinite term. But Graham's toxic tale keeps on rolling. Inside those cold prison walls, he just couldn't shake his obsession with toxicology. Then, in 1974, at Parkhurst Prison, it looks like he took the easy way out. They found him dead in his cell, a victim of self-poisoning. To this day, criminologists and psychologists are still trying to wrap their heads around his disturbing psyche. And number 1, Amarjeet Sada. Okay, everybody, hold on tight because we're diving into a chilling tale. A tender 8-year-old named Amarjeet, whose very first victim was an infant from his own family. His aunt left her daughter in their care while she was away for work. One day, Amarjeet, irritated by the child's cries, decided to silence her forever. It's heart-wrenching, and his family, understandably devastated, couldn't believe what their own son had done. But this is just the beginning. Now, Amarjeet came from a financially strained background. His parents, hardworking laborers, noticed some alarming signs early on. He had this morbid fascination with death and a cruel streak towards animals. Their limited access to mental health resources due to their circumstances meant he couldn't get any intervention or support. But that horror continued, and Amarjeet's younger sister became his next victim. When confronted about this heinous act, his response was chillingly emotionless. Just like that, but this terror didn't stop at home. It spilled out into the village. A girl named Khushbu, whom Amarjeet met at a village school, fell prey to his dark impulses. No witnesses this time, which emboldened him. But the village's growing suspicions quickly honed in on Amarjeet, especially after he openly admitted to the deed with a disturbing sense of pride. The fear and panic in the community reached a boiling point, leading to Amarjeet's detainment by the village elders, who then handed him over to the police. Subsequent psychiatric evaluations diagnosed him with a conduct disorder marked by chronic and persistent antisocial, aggressive, or defiant behavior. It was surmised that their vulnerability and inability to resist or retaliate influenced his choice of infants as his victims. Now, the court had a real dilemma on its hands: a child murderer. They charged him with multiple counts of homicide, but given his age, Amarjeet was placed in a juvenile facility where he remained until reaching adulthood. And here's something creepy and unsettling. There are rumors that he might still be out there, wandering the streets of India under the alias Amarjeet. These are bone-chilling stories, making you question the darkest corners of the human psyche.